What is the true price of kindness? For Elara Vance, a 24-year-old waitress drowning in debt, the answer was a single bowl of soup. Every day she balanced on the razor's edge between paying for her brother's life-saving surgery and keeping a roof over their heads. In the bustling, unforgiving world of the five-star restaurant where she worked, compassion was a luxury she couldn't afford. Yet when a crippled, destitute man began visiting her section, a man who couldn't even pay for a glass of water, she found herself fighting an unseen war. A war against her tyrannical boss, against her own desperation, and against a reality that punished goodness. This is the story of how one secret act of charity, repeated day after day, led not to ruin, but to a revelation so staggering it would shatter her world and expose the incredible truth hiding in plain sight. The scent of truffle oil seared scallops, and old money hung heavy in the air at Aurelia, a restaurant so exclusive that its name was spoken in whispers among the city's elite. For its patrons, it was a sanctuary of decadent comfort. For Elara Vance, it was a gilded cage, a battlefield where she fought for survival, one serviette and smile at a time. Elara was not made for this world. Her smile, though practiced and professional, never quite reached her tired grey eyes. Her hands, nimble as they were, at arranging silver cutlery, bore the faint, indelible calluses of a life lived far from the velvet-upholstered booths she now served. Each night she traded her worn-out sneakers for black, sensible flats that did little to soothe her aching feet after an 8-hour shift. Her life was a relentless exercise in accounting. Every dollar, every cent was allocated before it even touched her palm. The math was simple and brutal. Rent for her tiny drafty apartment, $1, $200. Utilities, $150. A meager grocery budget, $200. The rest, every single tip, every penny of her meager hourly wage went into a worn shoebox labeled for Liam. Liam was her world. Her 17-year-old brother, whose laughter used to fill their small home, was now confined to a hospital bed, his body waging a war against a rare congenital heart defect. The doctors had a plan, a surgery with a high success rate, but it came with a price tag that felt like a cosmic joke, a $50,000 down payment. Elara had managed to scrape together just over $18,000. The hospital's financial aid office had been polite but firm. The clock was ticking. Her manager at Aurelia Marcus Thorne was a man carved from polished marble and disdain. He moved through the restaurant with the predatory grace of a shark, his eyes missing nothing. A crooked fork, a water glass less than half full, a smile that he deemed insufficiently bright, all were grounds for a venomous reprimand, whispered just out of earshot of the clientele. Marcus worshipped two things: profit margins and appearances. Charity, in his view, was a form of theft. Vance? His voice sliced through the dinner rush one Tuesday evening. Table 7, the Hendersons. They're celebrating their anniversary. I want you to push the 78 Chateau Margaux. Don't offer the house red. In fact, forget we have a house red. Yes, Mr. Thorne. Elara replied, her voice a practiced monotone. The 78 Margaux was $1,500 a bottle. A 20% tip on that alone would be more than her grocery budget for the month. The thought was a fleeting, dizzying fantasy. She approached the Hendersons, her smile firmly in place, and launched into her well-rehearsed speech about the wines, notes of cedar and blackcurrant. They ordered it without a second thought, the price an irrelevance. As she walked away, the weight of her two lives, the deferential servant and the desperate sister, pressed down on her. It was in the midst of this suffocating opulence, on a cold, rainy Wednesday, that he first appeared. The bell above the heavy oak door chimed, admitting a gust of wind and a man who seemed to have been swept in with the street refuse. He was in a rickety manual wheelchair, its wheels caked with mud. A threadbare military-style jacket, decades old, was draped over his thin shoulders. His face was a road map of hardship, etched with deep lines, and his grey hair was unkempt and damp. His hands, resting in his lap, trembled with a slight, constant tremor. He navigated the plush carpeting with difficulty, his movements slow and deliberate. The other patrons stared, their expressions a mixture of pity and annoyance. This was not the sort of person who frequented Aurelia. Marcus's eyes narrowed instantly. He began striding towards the man, his intent clear to eject this unsightly stain from his perfect tapestry. But Ilara, seeing the scene unfold, acted on an impulse she couldn't explain. She intercepted her manager, placing herself directly in his path. "Mr. Thorne, I have this," she said quickly, her voice low. "It's my section. I'll handle it." Marcus stopped, surprised by her assertiveness. He looked from Ilara to the man who had finally settled himself at the smallest, most secluded table in the corner, a table usually ignored. "See that you do," Marcus hissed, his eyes like chips of ice. "Get him a glass of tap water and get him out. He's scaring the clientele." Ilara nodded, her heart pounding. She grabbed a menu and a glass of water and walked towards the corner table, feeling the weight of 100 judgment-filled eyes on her back. The man didn't look up as she approached. He was staring at his own trembling hands as if they were foreign objects. "Good evening, sir," Ilara said softly. "Welcome to Aurelia." He flinched as if startled by the direct address. Slowly he raised his head. His eyes were a pale, washed-out blue, clouded with a weariness that seemed to go bone-deep. They held no expectation, only a quiet, profound resignation. I don't mean to be a bother," he rasped, his voice rough with disuse. "It's just so cold out. I thought I could sit for a moment." "It's no bother at all," she said, her professional smile softening into something genuine. She placed the water on the table. "Can I get you something to eat? Some soup, perhaps?" "The cream of tomato is wonderful today." He gave a dry, humorless chuckle. "My dear, I doubt I could afford the napkin you just placed on this table." He gestured again at his hands. "Can't hold a job. Can't hold much of anything. My wallet is as empty as my stomach." Ilara's heart clenched. She saw not a nuisance, but a reflection of her own fears of being one misstep, one medical bill away from utter destitution. In that moment, the $50,000 she needed felt like an impossible mountain, and this man was at the very bottom of it. The rules, Marcus's voice in her head, her own desperate need, they all screamed at her to walk away. But the look in the man's eyes, a hollowed-out cavern of lost hope, silenced them all. "The kitchen," she said, leaning in conspiratorially. "They made an extra batch of soup by mistake. It's just going to be thrown out. It would be a shame to waste it. Let me get you a bowl. On the house." It was a lie, a dangerous one. But as the man's clouded eyes welled up with a flicker of disbelief, and then a wave of silent, overwhelming gratitude, Ilara knew it was a lie she was willing to tell. The soup arrived, steaming and fragrant, in a heavy ceramic bowl, accompanied by a basket of fresh, crusty bread. Ilara placed it gently on the table. The man who said his name was Arthur stared at it as if it were a mirage. He picked up the spoon, his trembling hand, making the task a monumental effort. After several attempts, he managed a spoonful, and a look of pure, unadulterated relief washed over his face. He ate slowly, savoring every drop. Ilara watched him from a distance, her stomach a knot of anxiety. Marcus was prowling the dining room floor, his gaze sweeping across each table. To cover her tracks, she had rung in the order and immediately voided it, citing customer dissatisfaction on a non-existent order from another table. It was a risky move. The system tracked every void, and Marcus reviewed the reports daily. But it was the only way. When Arthur finished, he wiped his mouth with the linen napkin, his movements imbued with a strange, forgotten dignity. He tried to push a few crumpled single-dollar bills and some loose change across the table. "It's not much," he whispered, avoiding her eyes, "but it's all I have." Ilara gently pushed the money back towards him. "Please," she said, her voice barely audible. "Keep it. You need it more than I do. Just come back tomorrow if you're hungry." The offer hung in the air between them, an unspoken pact. Arthur looked at her, his gaze intense, searching. It was as if he were looking past her waitress uniform, past the tired smile, and into the very core of her. He simply nodded, a universe of gratitude contained in the small gesture, and slowly wheeled himself out of the restaurant and back into the unforgiving night. The next day he returned, and the day after that. A silent routine was born. Arthur would arrive at the same time, just as the evening rush was beginning to subside, and take the same corner table. Ilara would greet him with a quiet smile and bring him whatever she could, spirit away from the kitchen. Sometimes it was another, mistaken, order of soup. Other times the chefs who had their own grievances with Marcus would turn a blind eye as she made him a simple plate of pasta or a sandwich from leftover prime rib. She became an expert in culinary espionage, a master of the compassionate lie. She created a secret ledger in her mind. A bowl of soup was a voided order. A plate of pasta was an incorrectly fired side dish. The cost of her deception grew with each visit. Marcus was a hawk. He'd corner her by the POS system, his eyes scanning the daily reports. "Another void, Vance?" he'd ask, his voice dripping with suspicion. Table 12 sent back their risotto. Funny, they seemed perfectly happy when they paid their $600 bill. "They said it was too salty, Mr. Thorne," she'd reply, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I didn't want to risk a bad review online." The mention of a bad review was her shield. Marcus was terrified of anything that might tarnish Aurelia's pristine 5-star rating. It kept him at bay, but only just. He started watching her more closely. She could feel his eyes on her whenever she went near Arthur's table. Her colleagues noticed too. Chloe, a fellow waitress with a sharp wit and a kind heart, pulled her aside one evening by the industrial dishwashers. "Ilara, what are you doing?" Chloe asked, her voice laced with concern. "I see you with that old man. Marcus is watching. You're going to get yourself fired." "He's hungry, Chloe," Ilara said, simply folding a stack of napkins. "We're all hungry," Chloe retorted, though her tone was gentle. "I've got 2 kids at home. You've got Liam. This job, it's a shark tank, but it pays the bills. You can't risk it for a stranger." "I know," Ilara whispered, the truth of Chloe's words weighing on her. "I know I shouldn't. But when he looks at me, I just can't turn him away." The shoebox for Liam was filling up too slowly. The deadline for the down payment was less than a month away. The hospital called twice a week, their automated reminders a cold metallic threat. Desperation gnawed at her. She started picking up extra shifts, working doubles, until her feet were numb and her vision blurred with exhaustion. Every dollar was a victory, but it was never enough. One evening, Arthur seemed more frail than usual. A racking cough shook his thin frame. He barely touched the food she brought him. "Are you all right, Arthur?" she asked, kneeling by his wheelchair. He waved a dismissive hand, but his breathing was shallow. "Just a cold. The shelters. They're not the warmest places this time of year." Without thinking, Ilara slipped her hand into her apron pocket. Inside were her tips from the night, a precious $134. It was rent money, food money, Liam money. Her hand trembled as she pulled out two $20 bills. "Here," she said, pressing them into his palm, "for a room. Just for tonight. Get a warm bed and some rest." Arthur's eyes widened. He tried to refuse, but she closed his fingers over the bills. "Please," she insisted. "Don't argue." He looked down at the money, then back up at her. A single tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek. "No one," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "has shown me such kindness in a very long time." As he left, Elara felt a strange mix of terror and peace. She had just given away money she desperately needed. It was an act of profound financial recklessness. Yet the look on Arthur's face had given her something that money couldn't buy, a flicker of hope. A feeling that in a world of cold, hard transactions, a single act of selfless giving still had meaning. She didn't know that Marcus Thorne had been watching the entire exchange from the shadows of the wine cellar doorway, a cruel, triumphant smirk spreading across his face. He had finally found the proof he was looking for. The next week was a master class in psychological warfare. Marcus didn't confront Elara immediately. Instead, he chose to torment her, tightening the screws with a slow, sadistic patience. Her shifts were changed to the least profitable times. She was assigned the most difficult, demanding customers. Minor imagined infractions were written up and placed in her file. "Vance, this table wasn't bust within 30 seconds of the party leaving," he'd snap. "Vance, did you polish this silverware? I see a fingerprint. Do it again. All of it." He was building a case brick by painstaking brick, ensuring that when he finally fired her, it would look not like a sudden act of malice, but the justified culmination of a pattern of incompetence. Elara felt the pressure mounting. The air in the restaurant grew thick with unspoken threats. Chloe gave her worried glances, shaking her head sadly from across the dining room. Despite the escalating risk, Elara couldn't bring herself to turn Arthur away. His visits were the one anchor of authentic human connection in her otherwise transactional world. Their conversations remained brief, but a quiet friendship had begun to form. He never spoke of his past, and she never spoke of her troubles. They existed only in those small, stolen moments over a bowl of soup. He would ask about her day, and she would tell him a sanitized version, never revealing the storm raging around her. She found a strange solace in his quiet presence, a sense of purpose that transcended tips and profit margins. One afternoon, the call she had been dreading came. It was Dr. Evans, Liam's cardiologist. "Elara," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "We need to schedule the surgery. Liam's latest scans are concerning. The pressure on his pulmonary valve is increasing. We can't wait much longer." "I know," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm trying. How much longer do I have to get the deposit?" There was a pause. 2 weeks, Dr. Evans said. 15 days. After that, we'll have to give his slot to the next person on the list. I'm sorry, Elara. I pulled every string I could. 15 days. The number echoed in her head like a death knell. She had just over $21,000. She needed almost $30,000 more, an impossible sum. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. For the first time, true abject despair began to set in. The smile she wore at work became a brittle, fragile mask. That night, she worked with a frantic energy, desperate for big tips. She upsold wine, recommended the most expensive appetizers, and laughed at every bad joke from her wealthy patrons. The performance was exhausting. By the end of the night, she had made an impressive $250, but it felt like a single drop in an endless ocean of debt. Arthur arrived late, looking haggard. The chill of late autumn had set in, and his thin jacket offered little protection. She brought him a hearty beef stew the kitchen had prepared for the staff meal, along with a steaming mug of tea. She sat with him for a moment, the exhaustion too heavy to bear standing up. "You seem troubled tonight, my dear," Arthur said, his pale blue eyes studying her face. Ilara forced a smile. "Just a long day." "Is it your brother?" he asked softly. The question caught her off guard. She had only mentioned Liam once in passing weeks ago. She was stunned that he had not only remembered, but had connected her current distress to him. She couldn't hold it in any longer. The dam of her composure broke. The story of Liam's condition, the surgery, the impossible deadline, it all came pouring out in a hushed, desperate torrent. She spoke of her fear, her helplessness, and the crushing weight of knowing that her brother's life depended on her ability to make rich people buy expensive wine. Arthur listened, his expression unreadable. He didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. He simply listened, his quiet attention, a greater comfort than any words could have been. When she finished, a single tear rolling down her cheek, he reached across the table and patted her hand. His own hand was trembling, but his touch was surprisingly firm. "Courage," he whispered, his voice raspy. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the assessment that something else is more important than fear." His words, so simple and profound, struck a chord deep within her. For a moment, she felt a surge of strength. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a fighter, and Liam was worth fighting for. "Thank you, Arthur," she said, wiping her eyes. What she didn't see was Marcus Thorne standing in the darkened entryway to the kitchen, his phone in his hand. He hadn't recorded the conversation, but he had taken a picture. A damning picture of his waitress on the clock, sitting and crying with a homeless man while other tables needed tending. It was the final piece of ammunition he needed. The storm was no longer gathering. It was about to break. The following evening, the atmosphere at Aurelia was electric with tension. A famous food critic had been spotted in the city, and Marcus was in a state of high alert, his paranoia dialed up to an unbearable level. He stalked the floor like a caged panther, critiquing every movement, every smile. "Vance, your apron has a crease in it. Go and iron it." "Now, Vance, the wine list you gave. Table 4 has a smudge on it. Do you want people to think we run a pigsty?" Ilara moved on autopilot, her mind a million miles away, counting down the days until Liam's deadline. 13 days left. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the lobby was a hammer blow to her heart. Arthur did not appear at his usual time. A part of Ilara was relieved, saving her the stress of another covert operation under Marcus's watchful eye. Another larger part of her felt a pang of worry. Was he okay? Had his cough worsened at 9 p.m.? In the middle of the main course, Rush Marcus beckoned her to his small glass-walled office at the back of the restaurant. His smile was thin and sharp, the smile of an executioner. "Close the door, Vance," he said coolly. Her stomach plummeted. She knew this was it. On his desk was a small stack of papers. On top was the grainy photograph he had taken the night before. He tapped it with a manicured finger. "Explain this," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "I was taking a short break," she stammered. "A break?" he scoffed. "You were fraternizing." "With him?" He gestured vaguely towards the dining room. "But this is just the latest in a long line of transgressions, isn't it, Ilara?" He spread the papers out. They were printouts of her voided orders for the past month. Dozens of them. Each one was circled in red ink. Cream of tomato soup, voided. Risotto, voided. Side of pasta, voided. It's quite a pattern, wouldn't you say? It seems you have a very specific, recurring, mistake that you make, one that always seems to coincide with the visits of your pet project in the corner. Ilara's blood ran cold. The customers weren't happy. "Stop lying," he snapped, his composure cracking. "I've been watching you for weeks. I know you've been stealing from me. Stealing food to give to that vagrant." "I wasn't stealing," she protested, her voice rising. "The food was going to be thrown out. It was waste. Everything in this restaurant belongs to me until it is sold or in the trash can," he roared, slamming his fist on the desk. "The inventory, the food, your time. You have been stealing, all three. You are a thief and a liar." The words hit her like physical blows. She had justified her actions as kindness, as a small rebellion against a heartless system. But hearing them twisted into the language of crime and deceit made her feel a profound sense of shame. "Mr. Thorne, please," she begged, tears welling in her eyes. "My brother is sick. I need this job. I'll pay for everything. I'll work for free to make it up." Marcus let out a cruel laugh. "You think I want a thief working in my restaurant? You are a liability, Vance. A stain." He stood up and walked to the office door, opening it wide so that the staff and nearby patrons could hear. His voice dropped back to a cold, professional tone designed for maximum humiliation. "Ilara Vance," he announced into the suddenly quiet dining room. "Your employment at Aurelia is terminated effective immediately. You have been caught stealing company property. Please gather your personal belongings from your locker. Security will escort you from the premises." Time seemed to slow down. The clatter of cutlery stopped. Conversations died. Every eye in the restaurant turned to her. She could see Chloe's face, pale with shock. She saw the Hendersons from the other night, staring with open curiosity. It was a public, shaming a ritual sacrifice to the god of profit margins. Her body felt like lead. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Humiliation washed over her in a hot, suffocating wave. She had lost everything: her job, her only source of income, her last hope for Liam. And then she saw him, just entering the restaurant, wheeling himself slowly through the door, was Arthur. He took in the scene at a glance, Ilara standing frozen in the doorway of the office, tears streaming down her face. Marcus standing beside her, a smug look of victory on his. The entire restaurant watching in stunned silence. Their eyes met across the room. In his she saw not pity, but something else. A flicker of cold, hard fury. A look of such intense, controlled anger that it sent a shiver down her spine. He started to wheel himself forward, his movements no longer slow and frail, but deliberate and powerful. He was heading straight for them. The world had shrunk to the space between Ilara and the door. The stares of the patrons felt like physical objects, pinning her in place. Marcus's words echoed in the cavernous silence of the restaurant. Thief. Liar. Stain. Security. Marcus called out, his voice sharp with authority. Two burly men in black suits, who usually stood discreetly by the entrance, started moving towards her. Ilara's paralysis broke. A primal urge to flee, to escape the suffocating weight of 100 pairs of eyes, took over. She turned, stumbling away from the office, away from Marcus. She didn't want to be escorted out, like a common criminal. "Miss Vance, wait," a voice called out. It was Arthur. He had made his way to the center of the room, his rickety wheelchair, a strange, incongruous sight on the plush Persian rug. Marcus turned on him instantly. "And you are no longer welcome here. Get out. You are trespassing." Arthur ignored him completely. His gaze was fixed on Ilara. "Don't leave," he said, his voice surprisingly clear and steady, lacking its usual raspy quality. It carried an odd weight of command, that made people pause. "What did you say?" Marcus sneered, striding over to the old man. "Are you deaf as well as destitute? I said get out before I have you thrown out." Arthur slowly looked up at Marcus, and the weariness in his eyes was gone, replaced by an arctic chill. "I believe," he said, his voice low but resonating through the room, "that you are the one who will be leaving." A ripple of confused laughter went through some of the patrons. Marcus's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "That's it. Security remove this man. Now he's delusional." The two security guards changed their course from Ilara and moved to flank Arthur's wheelchair. They each placed a hand on his shoulder. Ilara watched the scene as if from a great distance. This was her fault. She had dragged this poor, helpless man into her mess. Now he was going to be manhandled and thrown into the street because of her. The final bitter fruit of her misguided kindness. "Don't touch him!" she cried out, surprising even herself. But it was too late. Or so she thought. As the guards tried to grip the wheelchair, Arthur spoke again, his voice now like steel. "I would advise you to take your hands off me, gentlemen, unless you wish to seek new employment tomorrow morning." The guards hesitated. There was something in his tone, an absolute certainty that gave them pause. Marcus let out a derisive snort. "And who do you think you are, the King of England?" Arthur's gaze shifted from the guards back to Marcus. A faint, cold smile touched his lips. It was not a pleasant smile. "No," he said calmly. "Something far more relevant to you." He reached inside his threadbare jacket, not with a trembling hand, but with a swift, steady motion. He produced not a weapon, but a sleek, modern smartphone. With a few taps of his thumb, he made a call and put it on speaker. "Evelyn, are you and the legal team on standby?" he asked. A crisp, professional woman's voice answered immediately from the phone speaker. "Yes, sir. We are in the car just outside. Are you ready for us?" "Indeed," Arthur said. "Initiate the protocols. Effective immediately." "Right away, Mr. Blackwood," the voice replied. "Mr. Blackwood." The name dropped into the silent room like a stone into a deep well. Marcus froze his face, draining of all color. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. Ilara stared her mind, struggling to process what was happening. Blackwood. Arthur Blackwood. The reclusive, almost mythical billionaire founder and owner of the Blackwood Hospitality Group, the parent corporation that owned Aurelia and 24 other five-star establishments across the country. A man who hadn't been seen in public in almost a decade after a personal tragedy. A man rumored to be an invalid. The heavy oak doors of the restaurant swung open. A woman in an impeccably tailored grey suit, Evelyn, entered, followed by two men in dark suits carrying briefcases. They moved with an air of quiet, lethal efficiency. Evelyn walked directly to Marcus. "Marcus Thorne." She asked, though it wasn't a question. Marcus could only nod his eyes wide with terror. "You are hereby relieved of your duties as manager of this establishment," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You are being placed on indefinite administrative leave, pending a full investigation into allegations of embezzlement, workplace harassment, and violation of numerous corporate ethics codes. The security gentleman here." She gestured to her own team, not the restaurant's, "will escort you off the premises. You will not return to your office. Your personal effects will be couriered to you." The restaurant's security guards had backed away from Arthur as if he were radioactive. They stood awkwardly, unsure of their role, their authority completely usurped. Marcus sputtered. This is insane. You can't. On what grounds?" Evelyn glanced at the phone in Arthur's hand. "We have weeks of surveillance footage, audio recordings, and financial audits that show significant discrepancies between inventory costs and sales receipts, all originating from your personal terminal. We also have sworn affidavits from no less than 10 former employees detailing your abusive management style. She paused, then delivered the final blow. But mostly we have the word of your employer, Mr. Blackwood. All eyes turned to the man in the wheelchair, Arthur Blackwood. He looked at Marcus, and the mask of the frail old man was completely gone. In his eyes was the shrewd, calculating gaze of a captain of industry, a king surveying his domain. You have a very poor understanding of what constitutes waste, Mr. Thorne, Arthur said, his voice cold. You considered food given to a hungry man a loss. I consider a manager who bullies his staff, skims from the profits, and fails to recognize the single greatest asset in this room to be the real waste. His gaze then shifted, moving past the humiliated Marcus, past the stunned onlookers, and settled on Ilara. His expression softened the Arctic chill, replaced by a warmth that made her knees feel weak. He looked at her standing there in her creased apron, her face stained with tears, having just lost everything. And then he said the words that would change her life forever. This restaurant is mine, Ms. Vance, and I believe we have a job offer to discuss. The world tilted on its axis. Ilara felt a wave of vertigo, gripping the back of a nearby chair to steady herself. The name, the scene, the sheer impossibility of it all, it was too much to absorb. Arthur, her quiet, humble Arthur, was Arthur Blackwood. The man whose portrait, a photograph of a much younger, smiling man, hung in the staff hallway, a portrait she passed every day without a second thought. The tremors, the ragged clothes, the wheelchair, it had all been a disguise, a performance of such convincing detail that it had fooled everyone. Marcus Thorne was escorted out his face, a mask of disbelief and impotent rage. He didn't look at Ilara as he was led past her. He seemed to have shrunken in on himself, a man whose entire world had been demolished in under 5 minutes. The 2 security guards he had summoned now stood by the door trying to look invisible. With Marcus gone, Evelyn addressed the stunned diners with practiced ease. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the interruption. Please, on behalf of Blackwood Hospitality, your meals this evening are, of course, complimentary. We appreciate your understanding. A murmur went through the crowd, a mixture of excitement and awe. They weren't just witnessing a drama, they were part of it. The food critic, a man known for his cynical prose, was scribbling furiously in a small notebook. Arthur Blackwood then turned his full attention to Ilara. Ms. Vance, he said, his voice softer now. Would you join me at my table? I believe we have much to talk about. Numbly, she allowed him to lead the way to the secluded corner table, their table. He maneuvered the wheelchair with an ease he had never shown before. As she sat down, he pressed a small button on the armrest, and the chair rose slightly, bringing him to a more comfortable eye level. First, he began, I owe you an apology for the deception. It was not my intention to cause you distress, though I see now that it has. I don't understand, Ilara stammered, her mind racing. Why? Arthur sighed, a deep, weary sound that seemed to come from a place of old pain. 5 years ago, I lost my wife and my son in a car accident. The driver was a man I had just fired from one of my companies. He was drunk. He was angry. He blamed me for his problems. He paused, the memory casting a shadow over his features. After that, the world seemed different. I had built an empire on the idea of service, of providing people with the best. But I was surrounded by sycophants, by people who wanted something from me. The kindness I saw was all transactional. I grew cynical. I felt that basic human decency, the kind that expects nothing in return, was a myth. He looked around the opulent dining room. I built all of this, but I had lost faith in the people within it. So I decided to seek proof. I sold my estates, put my assets into a blind trust managed by Evelyn, and vanished. I wanted to see the world from the bottom up. I wanted to know if there was any genuine goodness left. I visited dozens of my own establishments, from hotels to cafes, looking just like this. In every single one, I was ignored, asked to leave, or treated with contempt. I was an inconvenience, a problem to be removed. Until I came here. Until I met you. He leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers. You, Ms. Vance, were the first person in 3 years who looked at me and saw a human being. Not a liability, not a stain, but a person who was cold and hungry. You risked your job, a job you desperately needed, not once, but every single day. You gave me food. You gave me your own hard-earned money. You gave me your compassion with absolutely no expectation of a reward. You didn't just pass my test. You shattered it. You reminded me what I had built all of this for. Elara was speechless. Every secret act of kindness, every lie she had told to Marcus, had been witnessed and understood by the one person who mattered. It wasn't foolishness. It was the very thing he had been searching for. The investigation into Marcus Thorne was already underway, Arthur continued. My team had been flagging his financial misconduct for months. Your treatment of me was simply the final catalyst. Seeing his cruelty tonight and your courage, it made the decision easy. Evelyn approached the table, placing a heavy leather-bound folder in front of Elara. Ms. Vance, she said, her tone professional, but with a hint of a smile. Mr. Blackwood is a man who believes in rewarding merit. Elara opened the folder. Inside was a contract. At the top it read, Offer of Employment, General Manager, Aurelia Flagship Restaurant. She scanned the details, her eyes widening in disbelief. The proposed salary was a 6-figure sum, more money than she had ever dreamed of. There was a comprehensive health insurance plan that would cover 100% of any family medical expenses. There was a signing bonus, a sum listed on the page that made her gasp. It was exactly $50,000, the down payment for Liam's surgery. Tears streamed down her face, but this time they were not tears of sorrow or humiliation. They were tears of overwhelming, incomprehensible relief. The mountain she had been trying to climb had vanished. I can't accept this, she whispered, shaking her head. I'm a waitress. I don't know how to be a manager. You know how to be a human being, Arthur said firmly. You have more integrity and a better understanding of what service truly means than any manager I've ever employed. You will lead by example. Evelyn will handle the business training. You will handle the people. You will reshape this place. You will make it a place where kindness is the currency, not just the wine list. He gestured to the folder again. That signing bonus is not a gift. It is an advance. Your first act as manager will be to call your brother's hospital and arrange for the payment. Your second will be to give every member of the current staff, except for Marcus's lackeys, an immediate 20% raise funded by the profits he was skimming. Elara looked from the contract to Arthur's face. The weary, crippled man she had served was gone, but the kind eyes remained. She saw now that his true strength had never been in his wealth, but in the heart that had desperately sought to find goodness in the world, and somehow against all odds he had found it in her. She picked up the pen beside the contract, her hand no longer trembling. "Where do I sign?" she asked. The dawn that broke the next morning felt different, the light filtering through the grimy window of Elara's small apartment, seeming warmer, less accusatory. For the first time in years, she hadn't woken up to the crushing weight of a ticking clock and an impossible debt. She was still Elara Vance, but the world she now inhabited was an entirely new country. In her closet beside her, worn waitress uniforms, hung a simple, elegant black pantsuit, delivered late last night by one of Evelyn's assistants. It felt like a costume for a role she had yet to learn. Walking into Aurelia that day was one of the most terrifying things she had ever done. The familiar scent of lemon polish and baking bread was the same, but her place within it had been fundamentally altered. The staff, her former colleagues, fell silent as she entered through the front door instead of the staff entrance. They watched her with a mixture of awe, confusion, and perhaps a little apprehension. Was she one of them, or one of them now? Her first act as manager was to call a full staff meeting, not in Marcus's cold, glass-walled office, but around the largest circular table in the dining room, Table 1 usually reserved for the mayor or visiting celebrities. She asked Chloe to stand by her side, a silent signal to everyone that the old bonds remained. She looked at their faces, the tired busboys, the anxious line cooks, the waitstaff, who like her knew the unique pain of smiling through exhaustion. She saw her own struggle reflected in their eyes. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice trembling slightly. She cleared her throat and started again, stronger this time. "I know this is unexpected, and I know what you might be thinking. Believe me, I'm thinking it too. Yesterday I was scrubbing wine stains off a tablecloth. Today I'm wearing this suit." She gestured to her new attire, and a few nervous chuckles broke the tension. "I'm not going to stand here and pretend I know everything about profit margins or inventory management," she continued, her gaze meeting each person's. "I'm going to be learning, and I'll need your help. But I do know what it's like to work here. I know what it's like to have your tips docked for a broken glass. I know what it's like to be afraid to call in sick. And I know more than anything that the heart of this restaurant isn't the decor or the expensive wine cellar. It's us. It's the people who work in the heat of the kitchen and spend 8 hours on their feet." She took a deep breath. Things are going to change. Effective immediately under the authority of Mr. Blackwood, every hourly employee is receiving a 20% raise. A stunned silence fell over the room, followed by a wave of gasps and incredulous whispers. An older dishwasher named Sal, a man who had worked there for 15 years and was famously stoic, openly wept. Furthermore, Elara said, her voice thick with emotion, "We are establishing an employee emergency fund. A portion of this restaurant's profits will be set aside every month. If you have a medical crisis, a family emergency, or you fall on hard times, that fund is there for you. No humiliating questions, no long approval process. We will take care of our own." The room erupted. It wasn't just cheering. It was a profound collective exhalation of years of pent-up fear and anxiety. They crowded around her not as a boss, but as one of their own who had somehow broken through the ceiling. Chloe hugged her tightly, whispering, "You did it, Elara. You really did it." Later that morning, sitting in the office that still faintly smelled of Marcus's expensive and cloying cologne, Elara faced her next most important task. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number for the hospital's billing department. "Yes, my name is Elara Vance," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I'm calling about my brother, Liam Vance." The administrator's tone was weary and practiced. "Yes, Ms. Vance. I have his file. We've been trying to reach you about the pending down payment for his surgery." "That's why I'm calling," Elara interrupted gently. "I'd like to take care of it now. The full amount." There was a pause on the other end of the line. The full amount, miss. The required deposit is $50,000. "I understand," Elara said, a smile spreading across her face, the first truly carefree smile she'd had in years. "But I don't want to make a deposit. I want to pay for the entire procedure, in full. Tell me the total." The administrator's tone shifted from bureaucratic indifference to stunned respect. After a moment of clicking keys, she gave Ilara the final figure. Ilara read the numbers from her signing bonus check and the routing information from the new bank account Evelyn had set up for her. When the transaction was confirmed, the woman on the phone said, "Ms. Vance, God bless you. I'll let Dr. Evans know immediately. We can schedule him for this Friday." After hanging up, Ilara leaned back in the plush leather chair and let the tears come, not of sadness or fear, but of a relief so profound it felt like she could float away. The mountain was gone. The war was over. They had won. Liam's surgery was a success. Ilara was there when he woke up in the recovery room, his face pale but peaceful. She watched the steady rhythmic line on the heart monitor, a beautiful life-affirming wave that was the direct result of a bowl of soup given to a stranger. When his eyes fluttered open, they were clearer than she had seen them in years. "Hey, Elle," he whispered, a real smile gracing his lips. "Did we win?" She squeezed his hand, her heart overflowing. "Yeah, kiddo," she whispered back. "We won." In the months that followed, Aurelia didn't just survive, it thrived. Ilara and Chloe worked in perfect sync. Chloe handled the logistics and scheduling with a firm but fair hand, while Ilara managed the people. She instituted mental health days, paid sick leave, and flexible scheduling. The chefs, freed from Marcus's restrictive cost-cutting mandates, began to innovate, creating dishes that were both brilliant and soulful. The clatter from the kitchen, once a frantic, panicked sound, now had a rhythm, punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter. The change was palpable to the customers. The service was still 5-star, but the underlying tension was gone. Servers genuinely engaged with patrons because they felt secure and valued. The story of the Waitress manager became something of a local legend, and people made reservations not just for the food, but to be a part of the story. Ilara made one small change to the menu. She added a permanent fixture, the Founder's Soup, a simple, elegant cream of tomato soup made with heirloom tomatoes and fresh basil. The menu description was short, a reminder that the simplest things, when offered with kindness, can change everything. $1 from every bowl sold was donated directly to the city's largest homeless shelter. It quickly became their most popular item. One rainy evening, about 6 months into her new role, Arthur Blackwood sat at his usual corner table. He was dressed in a simple but well-tailored cashmere sweater, his wheelchair replaced by a simple, elegant cane that he leaned against the table. His recovery, he had explained, was a long, slow process, but his time on the street had given him a new motivation to heal. Ilara joined him after the main rush, bringing 2 steaming bowls of the Founder's Soup. The restaurant was buzzing with the happy, contented murmur of a full house. "I still don't feel like I deserve all this," she confessed quietly, looking around the room she now commanded. "Sometimes I feel like I'm still that waitress, just wearing a better costume." Arthur took a spoonful of soup, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Deserve has very little to do with it, Ilara," he said. "Worthiness does. The world is full of people who feel they deserve wealth and power. Far fewer are actually worthy of it. You never asked for any of this. You simply did what was right when it was hard, when no one was watching, or so you thought." He looked at her, his pale blue eyes clear and kind. "You didn't just save your brother. You saved me too. I was a ghost, haunting my own life, rattling the chains of my own cynicism. You showed me that the empire I built could still have a soul. That's a gift no amount of money can buy." He then slid a brochure across the table. It was for the newly chartered Elara Vance Foundation for Compassionate Service. Her name was printed in elegant gold leaf. Her face, from a photo he had insisted she take, smiled back at her. She was a beacon, now a symbol for others. "Our first initiative," he said, "is to fund a new wing at the downtown shelter. It will have a proper medical clinic and job training facilities. It will be a place for people to get back on their feet." He tapped the brochure. "Your story will be its foundation." Elara stared at her name, her story now a tangible force for good in the world. All the fear, all the struggle, all the nights she had cried herself to sleep, worrying about Liam, it had all been forged into something beautiful and strong. She was no longer just a sister or a manager. She was a testament to the quiet, revolutionary power of a single selfless act. Looking at Arthur, the man who had been both a destitute stranger and a powerful billionaire, she finally understood. He hadn't just given her a job or money. He had given her back her own reflection, showing her that the kindness she thought was a weakness had been her greatest strength all along. And in the warm, gentle light of her restaurant, surrounded by the lives she had touched, Elara Vance finally felt at home. Elara Vance's story is a powerful reminder that we never truly know the impact of our actions. A simple act of compassion, offered without any thought of reward, set in motion a chain of events that not only saved her family, but transformed an entire community. It proves that a person's true worth isn't found in their bank account or their job title, but in the integrity of their character. Arthur Blackwood wasn't just testing his employees. He was testing the world, hoping to be proven wrong about its cynicism. And Elara, with nothing to her name but a kind heart, gave him the answer he was looking for. If Elara's incredible journey from desperation to triumph moved you, please take a moment to show your support. Hit that like button to let us know these stories matter, and share this video with someone who might need a reminder that goodness is never wasted. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story that proves hope is never truly lost. Thank you for watching.